Oh man, that's what happens when you skip the hot wax and press ultimate instead. Damn. Welcome back to GenX Horror. We talk about all things 70s and 80s horror and nostalgia. Gang, there's a few titles in today's video that really blew me away. Not notably acclaimed at all, and one whose director said it was the worst feature film he ever did. And that's crazy because it's actually my favorite film on today's list. So far, we've covered and shared 286 titles, and we're adding 10 more awesome, obscure, and just plain odd titles to the pile. Collectively, we could recall a time when our biggest worry wasn't algorithms or doom scrolling, but whether Blockbuster still had that weird horror movie with the gnarly cover art your best bud at school watched the weekend before. Back when Uncle Ronnie was president and MTV had Headbangers Ball, a lot of us were latchkey kids who came home to empty houses, popped in tired VHS tapes with poor tracking, and discovered a whole universe of slasher films that never got the Friday the 13th treatment and were just as gloriously worthy. These are the movies that didn't just entertain us, they warped our Mr. Pibb-fueled Gen X brains and made us the resilient juggernauts we are today. Come on, gang. Let's get into it.
Dangerous escaped mental patient. 26-year-old Jay Jones escaped from the Hobart State Hospital for the criminally insane last night after killing...
It's the fall of 1981. You're at a sleepover and someone's older sister works at the video rental place. She brings home this absolute banger starring a PCP-addicted bodybuilder who crashes Thanksgiving dinner like the world's worst house guest. Yeah, we're starting off with one of the odder additions to our library. This is 1981's Home Sweet Home, and it follows this chemically fueled maniac played by bodybuilder Jake Steinfeld, who later became Body by Jake, the fitness guru. Wild career pivot, as he murders his way through a family gathering with everything from an electric guitar to a car battery. The opening scene is absolutely unhinged and worth the cost of the rental alone in the 80s and 90s. This one was confiscated as a video nasty in the UK. Our killer Jay Jones literally giggles like a deranged child between murders and does backflips for no reason whatsoever, but it's likely the PCP if I had to guess. And even though I've lived a life, it's for sure a guess. This one was shot for close to nothing and featured a mime getting electrocuted, and this thing makes other holiday horror look like masterpiece theater. Director Nettie Pena convinced actual actors to participate in this chaos, and the result is the kind of movie that makes you wonder if the filmmakers were also digging into Jake's chemical motivation as well. But in that, man, beautiful I Can't Look Away VHS magic that defined our childhoods.
Jesus, you're so horny.
When darkness descends on the city, something happens to the girls who attend night school.
You know that feeling when you'd stay up way past your bedtime, the blue glow of the TV illuminating your face while your parents slept upstairs, and you'd stumble onto something that felt legitimately dangerous to be watching? 1981's Night School was that movie, a genuinely grimy thriller about a motorcycle helmet-wearing killer decapitating women connected to a Boston night school, dropping heads in aquariums or decorative fountains like some kind of twisted urban decorator. It really feels like an Italian giallo. Rachel Ward from the Thornbirds, and later on in '83 Final Tear, stars as the prime suspect's girlfriend in one of her earliest roles, navigating this gritty, pre-gentrified Boston landscape where the killer could literally be anyone. This is a little different than your standard slasher. Director Ken Hughes, who previously did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, to figure that one out, brought actual filmmaking technique to the proceedings, making it feel less like a cash grab and more like a genuine thriller that just happened to involve creative decapitations. My favorite scene, and you'll know it by the location where it was shot, was at the real location of the Jack and Jill daycare center back in the day. Shot over 5 weeks in 1980 and released right as the slasher boom was exploding post Friday the 13th. Night School got lost in the shuffle despite being significantly better made than most of its peers. And watching it now feels like discovering a lost new Hollywood crime film that accidentally wandered into a horror convention. The kind of discovery that made those late night VHS deep dives absolutely worth the next day exhaustion.
On August 10th, in a California drive-in, it all began.
We're going to talk about 1976's Drive-In Massacre, and this is a mid-70s flick that's basically a love letter to a dying American institution wrapped in the cheapest slasher packaging imaginable. The entire script was written in 1 week and shot, more amazingly, in 4 days. The majority of the cast used pseudonyms because this movie was made non-union and they wanted to avoid being fined by the Screen Actors Guild. This is true guerrilla style. Drive-In Massacre is exactly what it sounds like. Someone is brutally murdering people at a struggling California drive-in theater, slicing up victims with a sword during movies while confused detectives try to figure out if the killer is the creepy manager, the weird handyman, or possibly the ex-carnival geek who may or may not still be living in the area. And this is shot for likely loose change found in the projection booth and featuring acting that makes Home Sweet Home look like the Royal Shakespeare Company. This thing has a grimy aesthetic that perfectly captures mid-70s California decay. The drive-in itself looks like it's one code violation away from being condemned, which honestly makes it the perfect setting for random sword murders. Drive-In Massacre seems like essential viewing for Gen X kids who discovered it on VHS a decade later. It's that proto-slasher that predates Halloween by 2 years but has absolutely no idea what it's doing structurally, and it's a shame as much as it is a total vibe of a good time. There are endless red herrings, suspects who appear once and then just disappear, and an ending that basically shrugs and says, maybe the real killer's still out there, I don't know. Director Stu Siegel, who'd later produced Renegade and other TV shows, and dang, what's Lorenzo Lamas up to lately? He was clearly making this up as he went along, padding the runtime with footage of people watching movies at the drive-in, and the warehouse scene at the end was added last minute to extend the runtime. The kills are pretty nasty for the era. There's a sword decapitation that's genuinely brutal, and there's something deeply unsettling about murders happening in cars while family movies play on the big screen. Like someone took the nostalgia of drive-in culture and stuck its hand in a garbage disposal. The girl falling out of the car door was pure chaotic art. This is the kind of movie you'd find at the video store with a title that got y'all worked up, and you'd watch it because drive-ins were already becoming extinct by the 80s, and there was something melancholy about seeing this artifact of a vanished America, even if that artifact included terrible dialogue and a plot that stuttered into a close.
Little girl? Little girl?
What you're about to see may shock you. It may frighten you more than you've ever been frightened before.
We're going to talk about The Slayer from 1982, and you might remember begging your parents to let you stay up late to watch HBO's Coming Attractions montages, hoping to catch glimpses of movies they'd never let you actually watch anyway. And The Slayer was in that rotation. It's a moody, atmospheric nightmare shot in 38 days about 4 people vacationing on a deserted Georgia island, while an artist named Kay keeps having prophetic dreams about something with claws hunting them down. And what starts as a standard friends in an isolated location flick gradually reveals itself to be something a little weirder. Is there really a demon? Is Kay having a psychotic break? Is this all happening in her head? Hell, is it everything? I'm not spoiling it, and it for sure is not what you think. Director J.S. Cardone, who'd later write The Covenant and other bigger budget flicks, clearly watched a lot of European horror before making this, because The Slayer has that slow burn, dreamy logic that American slashers usually steamrolled right past in their rush to get to the next kill. This was released in the same year as Poltergeist and The Thing, and this got absolutely buried at the box office, but found its audience on VHS like most of these, where that final dream within a nightmare ending could blow teenage minds in the privacy of wood-paneled basements nationwide. Practical effects, including a pitchfork through center mass that's still genuinely nasty and done in a single take, were good enough to get this thing banned in the UK as a video nasty, which of course made every Gen X kid want to track it down even more, because nothing sells a movie like moral panic in the 80s. Speaking of video nasties that got banned in the UK, 1982's Hospital Massacre, also released as X-Ray because one title is never enough, is the kind of gloriously crazy slasher that could only exist in that magical window between 1980 and 1983, when studios would greenlight anything with a high body count. Barbie Benton, the Playboy model and hee-haw regular, plays a woman getting routine tests at a hospital on Valentine's Day of all days, while a psycho in surgical scrubs murders everyone around her because she... Well, look, I'm not going to give it away. No spoilers. It's my new October promise to you. The logic is beautifully insane. Our killer has somehow become a doctor or stolen scrubs. It's not really clear. He has access to all areas of this hospital, can alter medical records in real time, and orchestrates wildly elaborate kills while nurses and doctors just keep dying without anyone noticing there's an increasingly dire staffing problem happening. Director Bose Davidson, who'd later produced the Expendables franchise, shoots this with the aesthetic of a particularly violent daytime soap opera. It's all soft focus and primary colors until someone gets a hacksaw to the face. This was shot in an abandoned hospital, which feels nightmarish and dreamlike, with endless corridors that lead nowhere and examination rooms the size of basketball courts with geography that makes the whole thing even that much more unsettling. This is the movie you'd rent based purely on the title on the VHS cover, then spend the runtime marveling at how nobody, not security, not administration, not the police who eventually show up, seem particularly concerned that their hospital has a higher mortality rate than a medieval plague ward. That's a deep cut.
There's something out there in the woods.
What the hell are you doing?
Something horrible.
Speaking of deep cuts, here's a deep cut even for us VHS archaeologists. The Prey, shot in 1978, shelved until 1983, then barely released in 1984. It was a troubled production history that becomes obvious about 5 minutes in when you realize this is essentially 60% nature documentary footage and 40% actual horror movie shot in about 4 weeks. A group of impossibly wholesome teens, we're talking squeaky clean even by early 80s standards, head into the mountains for camping, unaware they're being stalked by a hideously disfigured gypsy who was burned in a forest fire decades earlier and now lives in caves eating whatever wanders by. And that entire story was actually cut from the final movie because the runtime was too long. What makes The Prey special, and by special, I mean perfect for making fun of with your friends at 2 a.m., is the absolutely glacial pacing, with lengthy sequences of, and I'm not kidding, deer drinking from streams, raccoons climbing trees, birds doing bird things. Like the director suddenly forgot he was making a slasher and thought he was making a National Geographic special. I appreciate it. I love the outdoors. I'm not here for the outdoors, though. The kills when they get around to it are actually pretty brutal. Our monster literally rips people apart. But you have to sit through so much wilderness B-roll to get there that you start wondering if the editor was padding the runtime or genuinely couldn't tell the difference between suspense and wildlife footage. Shot in the mountains outside Los Angeles with the cast of unknowns who unfortunately stayed unknown, The Prey exists in this weird space between slasher film and wilderness survival documentary. And I genuinely believe there's footage in there originally intended for a completely different movie. This is the kind of VHS you'd find at a yard sale. No case, just the tape with The Prey written on it in marker, and you'd watch it precisely because you'd never heard of it, and the video store wouldn't miss it if you kept it for another week. And then you'd understand exactly why no one was talking about it. But you kind of love it anyway for being so beautifully, bewilderingly wrong.
Do you think, sir, we might have a psychopath on our hands?
So here's where things get properly weird. And if I say properly or cheeky, that means it's British, right? Imagine if someone watched Silent Night, Deadly Night and thought, what if we did that, but in London and with worse production values, and the killer specifically targets people dressed as Santa? He ain't Santa. That's Don't Open Till Christmas from 1984. It's a UK slasher that feels like it was made by 3 different people who never spoke to each other about the movie at all. That's kind of what happened. Original director Edmund Purdom, who was also the lead actor, got fired mid-shoot. Then 2 other directors finished it, resulting in a glorious Frankenfilm. A maniac is murdering Father Christmases all across London in creative and disgusting ways. Death by chestnuts roasted over an open fire takes on a new meaning when someone's face gets shoved into burning coals. While a Scotland Yard inspector who looks like he wandered in from a completely different movie tries to solve this case. The tone veers wildly between a police procedural, the exploitation sleaze. There's a weird subplot about a pornographic photo shoot that I actually appreciate, and actual suspense. Sometimes within all the same scene, creating this disorienting viewing experience where you're never quite sure what movie you're watching. It was released in the same year the UK was having collective panic attacks over video nasties, which are all throughout this list, and they were corrupting youth beyond belief. This somehow escaped the ban, despite being significantly nastier than some films that got prosecuted. Probably because it was so incoherent that censors couldn't follow the plot long enough to get properly offended. The killings are genuinely inventive, though. One Santa gets a spear through the head, another gets castrated, another roasted alive. I'm not going to keep going on. It's great. This is essential viewing for anyone who thinks all slashers are formulaic, because Don't Open Till Christmas doesn't follow a formula so much as it actively runs away from anything resembling structure, and that chaos is precisely what makes it memorable 30-something years later.
Steve, Larry, and Rip, the Zero Boys, a winning team of survival game champions, ready for a weekend of fun in the wilderness of Southern California.
Wolverines! Alright, so imagine if Red Dawn was actually a slasher film, or hell, if Deliverance starred a bunch of preppy kids from Orange County who thought paintball qualified as survival training. That's the Zero Boys from 1986. A genuinely smart subversion of both action movies and horror that somehow flew completely under the radar despite being way better than it should have been. I had never heard of this at all. It's about a group of college kids who think themselves survivalists. Their team name is the title, the Zero Boys, which tells you everything about their self-awareness. And they head into the woods for a weekend of camping and immediately stumble onto a cabin full of snuff film equipment and evidence of actual murders. And that evidence is pretty much a corpse. What could have been another Friday the 13th clone becomes something more interesting. I mean, these kids actually try to fight back. They're using their paintball tactics. They're leading to home invasion sequences where they're setting traps and mounting defensive positions like they're in a Wes Craven directed Home Alone. Related, this one was filmed on the same locations and sets as Friday the 13th Part 3 from 1982. The director, who made the notorious video nasty Island of Death, clearly spent time studying both slashers and action films, because The Zero Boys has the structure of a horror movie but the sensibility of a survival thriller, with the kids' suburban warfare training being both their salvation and the source of dark comedy when reality doesn't match their middle-class tactical fantasies. Kelly Maroney from Night of the Comet and Chopping Mall stars as the final girl, who's significantly smarter than her survivalist boyfriend. And the film has this very specific mid-80s vibe where everyone's obsessed with being tough and being prepared without really understanding what that means. Shot over 18 days and released the same year as Aliens and The Fly, actual masterpieces that sucked up all the oxygen, The Zero Boys went straight to video. And right there is where it found its audience. Gen X kids who were starting to get tired of dumb teenagers making dumb decisions and appreciated watching characters who at least tried to think their way out of the situation, even if they were still basically cosplaying as competent kids. Honestly, this one is a new favorite of mine for some reason, and I'm so glad I stumbled across it. Here's where our list gets a little international flavor. It's 1988's Edge of the Axe, and it's technically a Spanish production shot in Northern California, giving it this weird dubbed movie vibe, even though it's in English. Like someone made a giallo but set it in Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley was even Silicon Valley. It's a mass killer in a white hood, and he's axe murdering people in a small mountain town, while a computer nerd, and this is 1988, so computer nerd means he owns a Commodore 64 and is therefore a wizard. He tries to solve the murders using his high-tech skills, which mostly involves a lot of green screen text and loading screens that mean nothing. The killer's mask is genuinely creepy, though. It's a blank white hood with no features that makes Michael Myers' William Shatner face look expressive. And director Jose Ramon Larraz, who made the cult classic Vampires with a Y, shoots the murder sequences with unexpected style, including a genuinely disturbing car wash kill that'll make you never look at those spinning brushes the same way. And for sure, that's going to be the intro today. What's great is how Edge of the X tries to be a high-tech thriller using 1988 technology. So our hero's computer investigation involves him logging into what appears to be the world's least secure database and just looks up everyone's secrets that somehow existed in there. But the mystery is actually pretty well constructed, with legitimate red herrings and a twist ending that, while not exactly Agatha Christie, is more thought out than most slashers even bothered with. Released during the tail end of the slasher boom, when the genre was already eating itself alive, pun intended, Edge of the X feels like it arrived from an alternate timeline where slashers evolved into tech thrillers instead of self-aware meta-comedies, which, scream and whatnot. This is prime, founded at the bottom of the rental shelf material. The VHS cover promises a cross between Friday the 13th and Halloween, but delivers way more than expected in terms of actual filmmaking craft. And you'd watch it, enjoy it, tell absolutely no one about it, then forget the title completely until seeing it on a list like this that triggers that deep memory of, wait, that was a banger.
The kids go to school. The fathers have good jobs.
Anybody home?
And the mothers eat their children.
Now we're going to talk about absolute insanity. Gang, It's Flesh-Eating Mothers, a shot-on-video gore comedy from 1988 that asks the burning question, what if a sexually transmitted disease turns suburban moms into cannibals? And then actually tries to answer it across a 4-week shoot and 2 years in post-production. A mysterious STD spreads through a seemingly perfect suburban community, transforming wives and mothers into flesh-craving monsters who look completely normal until they suddenly start eating their own children. And this movie does not mess around with the premise. Director James Martin made this for probably less money than your parents spent on groceries in 1988. And you can tell, the video quality makes it look like someone's wedding video if that wedding involved practical dismemberment effects and a scene where a mom eats her kid's fingers like chicken wings. The practical effects on the faces and mouths, though, were pretty great for the time. The social satire is about as subtle as a sledgehammer. It's suburban perfection hiding darkness, sexual hypocrisy, the tyranny of neighborhood watch committees. At least IMDb tells me that. It's all wrapped in a gore-soaked package that plays like John Waters directing a trauma film while on whatever the hell Body by Jake was into, which I think was PCP. What's amazing is how this thing actually commits to its crazy premise. These aren't sexy vampires or misunderstood zombies, unfortunately. They're literally just moms who've gone feral, and this film treats the body horror and domestic horror as equally important, not as many MILFs as I would have liked. Shot with actors literally found from an ad placed in Backstage magazine, and released straight to video in the late 80s when shot-on-video horror was flooding rental stores. Flesh-Eating Mothers had to compete with hundreds of other DIY gore films, but its completely unhinged premise and surprisingly committed performances, these actors were really going for it, helped it stand out in the bargain bin. This is the movie you'd rent based purely on the title. Watch with your friends while eating pizza, quote endlessly, "Don't eat that, Mom!" Then return it, having experienced something you couldn't quite explain to people who weren't there. Peak VHS culture captured in sticky low-budget glory. All of these movies defined so much of our formative years. They weren't multiplex movies. They were that beautiful gray area between officially released and did someone film this in their backyard? They taught us that budget limitations breed creativity and that the best movie nights come from taking a chance on that weird tape with the sun-faded cover. Now, which deep cuts did you guys grow up with? Now, throw in the comments what we're missing, what we've missed over the past, 296 titles? There's a load out there. Share in the comments what we're missing, what you want to turn everyone else onto, what changed your whole trajectory in this genre, and what made you look at things differently. It's incredibly exciting to me. If you're feeling that warm nostalgic glow right now, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe if you want. That's all great. Thanks again, as always. I love you guys.